5. Refer to the following professor's lecture. First, take some time to read the questions 21 to 25.
Types of heat transfer. They are called Alright, today's lecture is about heat. Actually, we will talk about the ways heat moves. This is called heat transfer. Now, there are 3 types of heat transfer. They are called convection, conduction, and radiation. Okay? Okay. Convection happens when heat moves through gases and liquids. When air or water heat up, they get lighter. Then they move away from the heat. They rise. When they get cooler, they change direction. They come back down to the heat again. In convection, this repeats over and over. For example, a hot air balloon. Fire heats the air. The hot air becomes lighter. The balloon rises up. But as the air cools, it gets heavier, so the balloon goes down. Convection is how hot air balloons fly. Now, next is conduction. This happens when heat moves through solids. First, a solid object is put on heat. Eventually, the solid object takes this heat and it gets hot. Some materials are very good at conduction. Metals, for example. This is why many cooking pans are made of metal. They heat up quickly. But don't touch them. Ouch! Conduction causes many burns. Finally, heat also moves by radiation. If you can feel heat from an object without touching it, then it is radiating heat. Remember, you can't see this heat. The sun, a toaster, a dryer, all these things use radiation. Have you ever warmed your hands by a fire? Even this is radiation.
Radiation.
T. To 30. Refer to the following conversation. First, take some time to read the questions 26 to 30.
Good art. Before it, art was considered good if it... Okay, so Impressionism was a new way of painting. It went against old art standards. It changed what was seen as good art. Before it, art was considered good if it was exact. Artists tried to reproduce what they saw on the canvas. They aimed to make the painting look just like what they could see. Impressionist painters were different. The first thing you will notice in an Impressionist painting is the use of color. These artists didn't mix colors. They put 2 colors side by side. They knew the eyes would blend the colors for them. The purpose was to create bright and bold colors. Movement was also important. Painters often worked outdoors. This was not normal at the time. Most painters had someone pose for them inside, but the Impressionists went outside. First, they wanted to capture life as it was happening. Their subjects were doing something. They were not posing. Blurred lines showed movement. They paid attention to lighting. Working outside allowed artists to use natural light. This is always changing. The change comes through in the painting. Different times of year are represented with the change in seasons. Impressionist art changed art. It broke the rules. Many people did not like it for this reason. If you ask me, that's what makes it so great. And over time, many people agreed. They can't remain in their old home because it's going. The book Watership Down. Let's talk about it today. It has sold more than 50 million copies. This book's themes are people and politics. This book looks at how people treat each other and criticizes governments. It uses a story about rabbits. A group of rabbits leave home to find a new place to live. They can't remain in their old home because it's going to be destroyed, so they escape. After a while, the group finds a safe new home, but they start fighting with other rabbit towns nearby. The rabbits in these towns are very different, and because of this, no one gets on. This shows how people in real life can't accept each other's differences. One group of rabbits is called Ephrafa. The leader is an adult male rabbit. He controls his town. He tells everyone what to do. No child, teenager, or adult has freedom to learn or experience anything there. The other group of rabbits is the Thorn Warren. It is also very bad. Things are too easy there. Growing up in a place like that means you learn very little. Some people think that the two rabbit towns are like different kinds of governments in the world, and that no government is perfect.
Oh, I see. Having a really easy life is bad for you. This is like the Thorn Warren. The rabbits don't have to work to find food there. And Ephrafa is a place where there is no real freedom, so it is bad too.
Yes, exactly. Watership Down may seem like a simple story about rabbits, but it asks real questions about how we live. This is why it is so popular.
Choose the correct answers. What is the lecture mainly about? What is the reason the rabbits leave home?
People are working to an older age in Britain. The number of 70 to 74-year-old people who work has doubled in the past decade. Around 10% of British people in their early 70s are now working. It is the highest figure since records began. The British government says just over 250,000 70 to 74-year-olds currently have jobs. In 2005, there were around 100,000 of them. The government said people are working to an older age and are deciding to retire later. A Labour Union spokesperson said the reason for people working in their old age is because retirement pensions in Britain are becoming more difficult to live on. Many older people have to work and delay retirement to be able to survive. Employment spokesman Francis O'Grady said, "The last decade has seen big changes in the labour market, with far more people working beyond retirement age. While there are plenty who enjoy remaining in work, many need to earn extra cash because they cannot afford to retire." He added that, "We need decent jobs and pensions for all so that people can make a genuine choice about whether they remain in work." A spokesman for small businesses, John Allen, said more older people were starting their own businesses. He said, "More and more older people are deciding on a career change later in life and are starting up their own businesses, pursuing something they may have dreamed of doing for years.
That is the end of part 2. Now turn to part 3. You will hear 3 different talks or lectures. In each talk or lecture there are 5 questions. For each question, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D. You will hear the talks or lectures only once. Now open your questions paper and look at talk or lecture 1. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question.
"5 years ago, I was delighted to be on..."
Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
Dolls have always fascinated me, and that's why, 5 years ago, I was delighted to be offered the job of running a doll museum. Dolls have existed for thousands of years, and the earliest dolls we know about were found in graves in ancient Egypt. I only wish we could get 1 or 2 for our museum, but we haven't unfortunately got anything as old as that in the museum. All the same, we have got examples from Europe from the 12th century, but my favourite early dolls are actually from the 17th century. They interest me not just because they are early, or fairly early, but also because of the clothes they're wearing. They have their original clothes, and from them we know what the owners wore, since dolls in those days were always dressed like their owners. They were made of the only material readily available for things like this at the time, solid wood, and they were painted in great detail. In fact, on the best examples, like the ones in the museum, the detail includes the 17th century makeup. Dolls like these were very expensive then, and only the very rich could afford them. These days, they're popular with collectors, and if you want one today, you have to pay anything up to £10,000 for a doll in perfect condition from this time. By the way, what makes them so valuable is that, as far as a collector is concerned, a doll is only worth collecting if it is in perfect condition, and that means having the original clothes. Doll collecting has become very fashionable since the museum opened, with people interested in dolls from every period, including later dolls. There's great interest in 19th century examples, when dolls were no longer made of wood, but began to have soft bodies and real hair. They were very delicate, and few have survived, meaning such a doll would be worth about £2,000, perhaps a bit more. Later, in the 19th century, you could often take off the doll's hair. If you can often see the maker's name underneath. And of course, the right one increases a doll's value. There was a really big change in dolls at the beginning of the 20th century. In the museum, we have one of the earliest examples, from about 1909, of a doll that's a model of a baby. Previously, all dolls, the earlier ones, were little adults.
Now open your question paper and look at talk or lecture 2. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully.
Hello, I'm Stephen Mills. I will travel with you on the Tiger Tour to India, but I'm not your tour guide. I work as an artist, and I'm going to take some photographs of tigers so that I can use them when I paint some pictures later. An expert guide will join the group when we arrive in India, but I'm leading the group until then. We leave London on the 6th of November, arriving in India the following day. It's a good time of year to visit the wildlife park where the tigers live. The rainy season finishes in October, and later in the year, the park gets more crowded and the tigers become shy. We'll spend 10 days in the wildlife park. There are 20 other types of animal and 300 types of bird to see, as well as tigers. There are 18 of us all together, and everything is organized for our comfort by the tour company. For example, although we're in the jungle, we won't have to sleep in tents. The hotels where we'll stay are all very comfortable. To be sure of seeing tigers, we'll stay in 2 different parts of the wildlife park. We'll spend 3 days in the north, where we'll travel around in an open truck, and the rest of the time in the south, where we'll travel around on elephants. That should be fun. On the way back to London, we have dinner and 1 night's bed and breakfast in the Indian capital, Delhi. There you can either go sightseeing or go shopping, whichever you prefer. But please note that lunch is not provided on our day of departure, as the plane leaves at 2 in the afternoon. Now, if there are any questions, I'd like...
Now open your question paper and look at Talker Lecture 3. You now have 35 seconds to look through the questions and the options in each question. Art, listen carefully.
For the second in our series about locally run businesses, we meet Simon Winridge, co-founder of the hugely successful Winridge Forest Railway Park. Welcome, Simon. Now, perhaps you can begin by telling us a little bit about how it all started.
Well, during the 1970s, my wife Liz and I had just acquired 80 acres of sheep farming land, and we decided to settle down and have children. Pretty soon we had a daughter, Sarah, and a son, Duncan. The place was wonderful for the kids. They particularly loved trains and gradually built up an enormous network of miniature railway track. I began to develop larger scale models of locomotives, but we didn't think anything more of it until I went on a trip to a theme park near Birmingham and decided we could do a much better job. So we set up a small one ourselves, based on the miniature railway, and we opened to the public for just a month that year, 1984, in July, our driest month, because our children said they didn't want our guests to have a miserable wet visit. I dealt with park business and Liz carried on with the farm work. It soon became clear that we were onto a winner. We began to extend the railway track and lay it among more interesting landscape by planting trees, which in turn attracted more wildlife, and by making cuttings through the rock. Nowadays, we're open all year round, and we're pleased to say that Winridge is one of the most popular visitor attractions in the area, with 50,000 visitors a year. 1.5 million people have been through our doors since we opened.
That is the end of part 3. Now you have 5 minutes to check your answers and transfer your answers onto the answer sheet.
Part 3. Questions 21 to 35. In this part, you will hear 3 talks or lectures. There are 5 questions for each talk or lecture. For each question, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D. You will hear the talks or lectures only once. Questions 21 to 25.
You will hear a talk about timeouts.
Won't harm them. This is breaking news English. Giving children time-outs won't harm them. This is breakingnewsenglish.com. There is good news for parents who are in 2 minds about the merits of using time-outs as a form of punishment. Research from the University of Michigan in the USA says there is evidence to show time-outs can be an effective discipline strategy for children aged between 2 and 8 years. Researchers say parents do not need to fret about their parenting skills if they give timeouts to misbehaving children, as they do not harm children's mental well-being or their relationship with their parents. In an 8-year study, researchers compared the emotional health and behavior in children whose parents used timeouts with those who didn't. They found there was no difference in the children. Timeouts are a form of discipline used by parents to modify their children's behavior. It usually involves sending children to a quiet space or quiet corner. The aim is for children to reflect on their behavior. Scientists have disagreed about the effectiveness of this strategy. Dr. Rachel Knight said, "Some reports in the media and by select organizations have suggested that timeout is ineffective and even harmful." She added, "There are some alarming claims that timeouts can damage the parent-child relationship and negatively affect emotional health, but the research simply doesn't support those claims." Dr. Knight concluded, "We did not find a relationship between timeouts and negative side effects in children." The 60-year-old woman was attending a wedding reception. Wasabi gives woman broken heart syndrome. This is breakingnewsenglish.com. A woman ended up in hospital after eating a large amount of the spicy condiment wasabi by mistake. The 60-year-old woman was attending a wedding reception in Israel. She mistakenly ate around a teaspoon of the spicy green paste, believing it to be an avocado-based dip. Her taste buds got the shock of their lives when the spices in the wasabi started working on her tongue and nose. The woman said that within minutes she felt pressure in her chest and tingling all over her arms. She went to hospital the following day, where she was diagnosed with broken heart syndrome. This is a term for symptoms that are similar to a heart attack following physical or emotional distress. Doctors said the woman was struck with a condition known as Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, which typically affects older women. It is also called broken heart syndrome. The heart's main pumping chamber weakens and suffers a temporary disruption so that it cannot pump blood properly. It is usually brought on by life-altering and shocking events such as financial troubles, serious traffic accidents, or bad news. The syndrome is not as serious as a real heart attack. Most patients fully recover within a month. Doctors said, "To the best of our knowledge, this is the first report of Takotsubo cardiomyopathy triggered by wasabi consumption." They reassured sushi lovers that wasabi is not dangerous.
Dangerous.
The quality of medical care you receive from doctors. Doctors give better care in the morning. This is breakingnewsenglish.com. The quality of medical care you receive from doctors could depend on the time of day you visit a hospital or clinic. A study from the University of Pennsylvania in the USA discovered a significant difference in the decision-making of physicians at different times of the day. The study concluded that a patient's chances of getting screened for cancer were a lot higher in the morning than they were in the late afternoon. Researchers investigated the numbers of women assigned to breast cancer screening throughout the day. They found that in the hour following 8 a.m., doctors ordered screenings for 64% of women who were eligible for tests. This figure dropped to 48% at 5 p.m. The researchers said the progressive reduction in assigned screenings as the day progressed could be due to decision fatigue. This is a kind of mental burnout that interrupts a person's ability to effectively make decisions the longer they work. Dr. Mitesh Patel said, "Our new study adds to the growing evidence that the time of day and decision fatigue impacts patient care." Researcher Esther Sang agreed, saying, "We believe that the downward trend of ordering screenings may be the result of decision fatigue, where people may be less inclined to consider a new decision after they've been making them all day. It may also stem from overloaded clinicians getting behind as the day progresses." This is Maya reporting from Saint-Cyr-le-Lec in France.
Nghe đọc cốt.
Justice to the giant buildings that also define the city. At the same
Part 3. Questions 21 to 35. In this part, you will hear 3 talks, lectures or conversations. The talks, lectures or conversations will not be repeated. There are 5 questions for each talk, lecture or conversation. For each question, choose the right answer. A, B, C or D. Questions 21 to 25 refer to the following professor's lecture. First, take some time to read the questions 21 to 25.
Generally, I think students should get a grade based on your overall work. But I
So I really appreciate your talking with me about this.
Well, I was concerned. Generally, I think students should get a grade based on your overall work. But I could see that you didn't do as well on the last test. And you had done very well on the first 2 exams.
I know. I was right in the middle of moving out of my dorm at the end of the semester, and that was my last exam. Normally, I wouldn't ask to take an incomplete, but I just didn't feel that a lower grade really represented my work.
I agree. But again, I don't usually like to do change of grade forms.
Okay, I understand.
So, well, I was thinking, perhaps if you want to do an extra credit project, let's say something that will help you pull your grade back up to an A-.
I can do that. Look, it's so important that I maintain very good grades. My financial aid package requires that I do.
I can understand that.
So what should I do?
Okay, here's the deal. You write a 5-page paper on Shakespeare's worst play, and I mean you have to have read all of them to decide what his worst play was. And tell me why you think so.
Wow. That's...
You want to get that change of grade, right?
Right, yeah, of course.
Fine. So you'll have 2 weeks to write this paper. Shouldn't take you too long if you've done your reading.
Oh, I have. I've read all the plays, and I think I know which one I'm going to choose.
Fine, don't tell me. Surprise me.
I will. So, what happens if I do a good job on the paper?
Then I will fill out the forms for a change of grade. It takes a few weeks after that, but the new grade should go on your transcript afterwards.
Okay, I guess I will have to go to the library over semester break. Thanks for your understanding.
Questions 26 to 30 refer to the following conversation. First, take some time to read the questions 26 to 30.
Programs. Do you know what presentation view?
Haven't got a clue about how to do a visual slideshow. Hi, I really need your help. I've got to prepare for a presentation, and I haven't got a clue about how to do a visual slideshow.
Well, that's why we're here. We have tutors who know all the word processing and presentation programs. Do you know what presentation viewer program you want to use?
I have no idea. Which is best?
That depends on what you want to do. Is your presentation just text, or do you want to use visuals with all the bells and whistles?
You mean like images and graphics and things that move around on the screen?
Exactly. You can include sounds or video too.
Yes, absolutely. The better it looks, the better I hope my grade will be.
Oh, I think it's important that a presentation look good, but you have to have the substance too.
I guess so.
You know what I mean. If you have a good foundation for your presentation, you'll be fine.
Oh, right.
Anyway, I would advise you to use this presentation viewer program because it's pretty intuitive. You can figure it out as you go along.
I've never really tried it.
After your tutorial, I think you'll find it's pretty simple. Speaking of which, when do you want to schedule your tutoring session?
As soon as possible. My presentation is next week, and I'm nervous about speaking in front of other people anyway. It would be bad if I had no time to practice using the program.
That's true. So then how about tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Bring your outline.
Great. I'll do that. Can I bring my laptop with me?
Sure. See you then.
So see you.
Questions 31 to 35 refer to the
government established a program to put people to work. It was called the Works With unemployment rampant in the economic depression of the 1930s, the government established a program to put people to work. It was called the Works Progress Administration, or WPA. The WPA funded the construction and maintenance of schools, parks, and highways. A small subdivision of the WPA, the Federal Arts Project, or FAP, was dedicated to employing artists. The reasoning behind the FAP was that the arts, as much as schools and bridges, contributed to the public welfare. And of course, artists at the time of the Depression were extremely vulnerable. Photographers were uniquely suited to the requirements of the FAP, not least because much of their work constituted documenting the achievements of the WPA. But documentation in the larger sense of capturing the reality of an entire country was the mission of many of the FAP photographers. One of the photographers funded by the FAP beginning in 1935 was Berenice Abbott. It was perfect timing for Berenice Abbott, She'd been photographing New York City since her return from Paris in 1929. Long before the FAP came into being, her stated purpose was to document and interpret America with love, but without sentimentality. And she felt that New York represented the essence of the changing nature of American society. I want to just go back to that word, sentimentality, because it relates to how we can define Abbott's approach to her art. As we talked about last week, photography in its initial stages had been used in a very painterly fashion. People like Abbott realized early on that photography's strengths had not been recognized or utilized. Abbott and her contemporaries rebelled against the widespread painterly use of soft focus in favor of the sharpness and clarity naturally inherent in photography. And they also rejected the sentimentality of typical pastoral scenes and landscapes in favor of a realistic depiction of fast-paced, modern urban life. It was this sensibility that she brought with her to New York from Paris, where she had been living for 8 years. Abbott's project was, simply put, to photograph New York City. She called her project Changing New York. And the way she approached this project was to try to depict, through photography, the interaction between human beings and solid architectural constructs. Or something like that. I don't have the exact quote. See, she was trying to find a balance between buildings and activity. So she decided to use more than just a handheld camera, which was perfect for, capturing the hustle and bustle of the city, but would not have done justice to the giant buildings that also define the city. At the same time, she didn't want to just overshadow everything with those buildings. So she began to use a large format camera, one of those rather bulky cameras you have to put on a tripod, and then you have to view the image under a black hood. Difficult to carry around, but it widened her vision. It allowed her to capture the size of massive modern buildings and also to juxtapose them in a shot with older, humbler ones. And to keep the life in her shots, she would often wait until someone passed by and make sure they were in the frame. Or she would ask people to walk through or stand in the frame. So she ended up using the large view camera for most of the work. Well, this Changing New York collection of 305 photographs is really a remarkable achievement. Its images are so powerful that Abbott is considered by many to be one of the 20th century's greatest photographers. In fact, one more contemporary photographer, Douglas Lever, was so inspired by her work that in the 1990s, he decided to re-photograph Abbott's New York photos. Imagine this. Lever went to the same locations, on the same day and same time with the identical camera that Abbott had used. He reframed Abbott's shots as exactly as possible. Why would someone do that? I have to admit, when I first heard about this, I was skeptical of one artist copying another so completely. But then I saw the photographs, and the amazing thing about them is that if you put them side by side with Abbott's, you see that they are a logical extension of her work. They take you even deeper into the contrast between the old and the new that Abbott so expertly revealed in the 1930s.
This is the end of the listening paper.